Hey guys, welcome back to the She Can Share podcast. I have an incredible guest today, and we have a live audience with the social media mentorship ladies. I'd almost want them to come off mute and give a little woot woot, but I'm sure they're all smiling on the screen, so it's okay. But welcome to the show. We have Tiffany on as a guest today. She is absolutely incredible. This is a little bit about Tiffany. I'm going to give you what she said to me for her bio, and then I'm going to tell you some stuff that I know about her personally because she's absolutely incredible. But Tiffany's passion is creating family, community, and deep impacts. Through her years of experience in consulting with both businesses and churches, she has dedicated her life to raising people and brands to their highest calling. But this is the thing about Tiffany, guys. She has a global business, global, not national, not local, global, with over 150 chapters with Gals That Brunch. She is on mission to eradicate loneliness and set the lonely in families through her mission, through her business, through Gals That Brunch. She is on the Girls Gone Holy podcast with me, and she's not a morning person. She is not a morning person. So the fact that she showed up today, I'm glad we have our calls at noon for this podcast. But she's definitely not a morning person. But when you get her in her sweet spot, like we are on this call today, the stuff that she shares is incredibly deep and profound. I don't think I've ever met somebody that really truly is a thought leader in their space and has had to overcome incredible challenges and has really truly lived out what it means to be victorious in Christ and has such a incredible mission and passion. And she's so good at helping people identify who they are and then express that and build community around their God-given gifts, talents, and abilities. So, Tiffany, welcome to the show.
Yay, thank you. That was quite the intro, and I'm definitely not a morning person, so it's 9 o'clock PST, but I made it, coffee in hand.
Yes, I'm so glad you're here. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, I'm excited.
So, okay, so you've built this like massive global brand with Gals That Brunch, and I know you also work with thought leaders and you help them with their branding. Man, before we get into some of like that stuff, can you just like share your story, how you got into doing what you're doing today?
Okay, yeah, I will try and stay brief and amazing in terms of it, but it is a little bit of a journey. So in real short, I was raised by a single grandmother, came from a family that was wreaked havoc and addiction and all you can say around that. And I literally say that I was the product of It Takes a Village because I had people wrapping around our single family unit, picking me up from school. My grandma was an entrepreneur, and people would pick me up, drop me off at her downtown store. And it's interesting enough to look back now over the past 30 something years and be like, oh my gosh, like I carry every single person with me that poured into my life, regardless of how brief the season was or how long the season was. And anyways, I didn't want to have anything to do with entrepreneurship. So um, from that experience, I ran into working in higher education for about 10 years and I moved all across the country working for different universities, working with their career services department and student services department. Also church planting during that time and moving around. And every single time I moved, I'm like, oh my gosh, like how do you meet people and what does this look like? And I found myself just in an interesting season in terms of church world, if you will, of like being single, young professional, and being like, okay, where do you fit in and what does this look like? And whatnot. So I moved to Virginia Beach, and before I even moved, I was like, I had just come out of a season of living in Colorado for 4 years. And when I first moved to Colorado, it probably took me 2 years to establish any sense or form of community. And it wasn't for lack of putting myself out there. I went to like every Bible study, I joined every softball team, I was playing volleyball like 4 times a week, like someone be my friend. And I don't think anyone quite prepares you for when you leave some of the natural systems that you grow up in through school or through work, having to establish yourself and think through that. And then the other piece of that is also how long it just takes to build relational equity with people, especially because we live in this instant gratification world within social media. So then it's kind of like, wait, I actually have to get to know someone and build chemistry with them over time. And so when I moved to Virginia Beach, I was like, I can't take 2 years to find community again. And so instead of waiting around to be invited to the table, I wondered like if I just started to strike up conversations with people and be like, hey, like, so I have this idea, like maybe we could go get brunch once a month. Everyone can invite friends, like we'll see what it looks like. And I kind of just put a small cry out on social media almost 10 years ago, which people did not do that 10 years ago. And just said, hey, I'm moving to the area. I don't know anyone. If anyone knows anyone, let them know I'm moving and I want to go to brunch with them. And the very first brunch I actually had planned within 2 weeks of moving to Virginia Beach, over 30 women showed up. Everybody was like crying their eyes out because I don't think people realized how alone or isolated that they felt in the struggle of wanting to meet their people. And then over the first year, we grew to 2,000 women, not on social media, just by word of mouth. Every time we brunched, everyone was just encouraged to invite a friend and give them the gift of community. And then one of the girls moved away to North Carolina, and she was like, Tiffany, what am I going to do without gals at brunch? So we joked that she could start a sister chapter. I found out my work was moving me back to California 6 months later, started a social media account to share our brunch adventures in Virginia, North Carolina, California. Within 1 week, we had 5 different cities reach out to us and go, hey, wait, you have a chapter here, a chapter here. I want to start a Gals at Brunch chapter. And then now, 10 years later, and having to rebuild the organization completely post COVID, we're now back into 150 cities in that. So that's kind of the rabbit trail, if you will. There's a lot more involved in that, but yeah.
Yeah, so just no big, 150 cities. I love it. My goodness, Tiffany. One of the things that I remember you said when we were on that retreat in Arizona together that I just found so much freedom in is you were like, yeah, in my first 3 years of business, I had no idea what I was doing. And, and I feel like that is actually so helpful for people because a lot of times when we're starting out, we feel so much pressure to have all of our ducks in a row, but you grew really fast. And can you just like share a little bit about that for anyone listening that's like, wow, it all just worked out for Tiffany. Has it all just worked out or was it a challenge?
No, it's been the blood, sweat, and tears. So when I work with people, I'm like, let me help save you it. So as I mentioned, I didn't want to have anything to do with entrepreneurship. I was raised by an entrepreneur, and there was amazing times within that, and also times where I've been obviously scarred for life. And so I was like, I'm gonna go keep building my life in the corporate world. I'm gonna go do ministry. It's gonna be amazing, and I just want to be able to have a normal job that allows me to just serve people and love Jesus. And Gals at Brunch was growing within the first year, and people are like, "Oh my gosh, like what are you doing? Like what is this?" And you obviously are making this into a business. And I was like, "Heck no! Like I am just doing this out of my free flowing spirit, and I'm just going to keep working." And then meanwhile, Gals at Brunch is like continuing to grow into other cities. And I'm like, nope, I'm just going to keep on working. And then I'm like starting to stretch myself thin. And it was actually more than 3 years. It was probably 7 years of doing Gals at Brunch just out of like, I'm doing this for fun and I'm not going to ask anyone for any money because I just want to do this and keep working. Meanwhile, I'm like literally dying to myself and like not in a season of thriving as I'm like continuing to try to balance full-time ministry, church planning, all the things. Meanwhile, also having moved a few times in that period of time and working on a church staff, which, is always really fun. And so, meanwhile, I had a girlfriend of mine, and if you don't know her, her name's Natasha Hemingway. I always say her name because everyone needs to go look her up online. She's incredible. She's a sales coach, and we had met through I was like in a local networking group in San Diego, and she knew the founder of that, and she's like, "You need to talk to Tiffany." And so anyways, we just have this total Holy Spirit conversation for 3 hours because she wants to start something like coffee and connections. And she's like, how did you do gals at brunch? And stuff like that. And I'm like, oh, no problem. You just do this, you do this, you do this, not thinking anything of it. And she's like, Tiffany, if you ever do this for someone ever again, like I'm gonna come to California and whip your butt. Like, do you understand like how valuable this is? And I was like, what? You're like, what are you talking? Just like not realizing that, I know that this probably speaks to a lot of us, like the giftings and the things that we carry, we don't even realize what we wield within that because it just comes as a natural ability to you. And so then you start to think about, well, how would I even teach people how to community build? Like, what do you mean people don't know how to community build, So that was right at the start of 2020, actually. And then that kind of just blossomed from there where it still allows me to kind of pursue Gals at Brunch as a ministry, if you will, of just helping build community and set people and family. But then meanwhile, I'm helping people that have membership programs and people that are launching masterminds and thought leaders, helping them build community and implement it into the structures of their company and all those things. And that would have never happened if it weren't for that, like literally God divine appointment of, talking to Tasha and then her telling me like if I ever give away information for free, she's gonna whip my butt. So
Yeah, that was a good conversation. I'm glad that you had that. And also just love your heart and all of it too. And I think for a lot of us believers, there's a weird thing in us where we feel weird about charging, but also, you know, we do need money in order to be a resource, in order to be more generous and obviously to pay our bills. So I love how you're doing both. And I love how you help brands and businesses build community. So can you tell us why community from a business standpoint, and then also just how it helps on the leadership level?
100%. So, I was literally thinking about this last night, and I just feel like I'm constantly caught in tears of like just seeing how God continues to divinely orchestrate community. And it's why it's so important, even in as we talk about the capital C church of being in community. And I know that sometimes people are like ready to throw the baby out with the bathwater, all the things that go along with it. And it's like if it's not for community, we don't get to see every level of who God is through everybody's life, like of who God operates in you and us then being able to see the fullness of Christ in every single one of us. And I'm like so honored I get to do the work that I get to do within community just because I feel like it's just this constant way that Jesus loves the world. And when I think about it in terms of like business and in leadership, it kind of goes hand in hand. I would dare to say that um there is this common misconstruement in kind of like the leadership world, where basically everyone's just a bunch of general managers, but really like who are the like leaders, like the leaders that we're ready to like follow and like be like, I'm ready, to pick up my cross and follow you. And I would say that our world sees very seldom few within that. It's really um managerial roles and positions and things like that. Whereas I feel like community really sets true leadership in place. And also, I feel like having worked with some of the top thought leaders and celebrities and people that are personal development gurus, pastors, missionaries, all the things, I've seen the underbelly of it. And I think in those seasons of life, it honestly has made me like weep. Because there's so many broken bodies because everybody's human in those experiences. Whereas I'm like, man, if people really allowed community to come alongside a lot of these leaders, I could just imagine a world where there's thriving and healthy leaders that are also leading people in positions of thriving and healthiness, because your mantle and your calling isn't only yours to bear. And I think so many times people are like, no, like this is the cross. I don't want to burden anyone else with it. Like this is what my calling is. This is what it's going to look like. And then yet you're not inviting people to come along on the journey with you. And I promise you that is not God's heart for you to carry it alone and to actually invite people. I think there's no greater invitation to be able to do that. And so I think that one community philosophically restores healthy leadership and allows people to take their rightful place to what God has called you to do. And then the second piece of it, from just like a business thing, if you think of it before like the online world even existed, it was like, how did people do business? Like, I think we all remember the yellow pages and, getting dropped off at our house and having people come door to door and what that looks like. And the thing that's associates like the human experience is connection. And I think that as we're in this beautiful online world, it's amazing and wonderful because it has allowed us to create connection. But there's also a missing element of it, of just like the human experience. And so when you start to implement community into the business experience, it's literally like the number one thing that people want in this world is a sense of belonging. So why wouldn't we as business owners or brands think about implementing that into our very structures of how we do business? Because it's what people want.
Yeah.
And when you think about like a holistic sales process or bringing people in, like, I don't know about you, but like even from a community sense, most of the time when you're doing group programs, even like this social media, like most of the time it's like, man, if I could have 10 Christinas, I would be like, it would be amazing, type thing. And then it's like, Christina, do you know there are people that are just like you that would also benefit from this? Because you're incredible. I want to continue to grow a community like you, of people. And then it's helping you actually serve a demographic that you're really passionate about wanting to serve versus people that sign up in your wheelhouse that you're like, I don't know if I'm meant to work with you or not. And then you start to think about, like, I worked for one coach that was spending like $250,000 a month in ads, and they would, spend 1 million, make 1 million, and then it was just like this continued cycle of churn and burn, and never allowing themselves to like fully get into the experience of actually being able to keep people and do that. So it's like, imagine spending less ad dollars and all those different pieces. So I could nerd out all day long on all the business benefits of it. But I think culturally the biggest shift is just helping people realize that community isn't the fluff word of the day, or the next marketing trend. It's actually something that has existed for as long as time, and we just are learning how to honor, I guess, the human experience a little bit better in that.
Man, Tiffany, I have like 10 questions and 10 different directions that I could go, but I
Mhm.
think for time's sake, one of the questions that probably most people are asking is like, okay, community, here's a twofold. What is community? What is it not? And how do you, from a business standpoint, and obviously I know that that also touches that emotional human experience standpoint, but from a business standpoint, how do you build that effectively?
Great questions. So, in its most traditional definition, like, community is gathering people together, doing life together around a shared interest or group. Like, I like horses, you like horses too. Wonderful. Like, let's start talking about how much we love horses. I will say what community is not, is kind of where I love my little soapbox to stand on, is community is not your audience. And you'll hear a lot of people on social media be like, oh my gosh, I love my community and I'm so glad you're here with me. And most of the time they're talking to their audience. Part of that is because you are broadcasting one to many. You're actually not having conversations, co-owning a space together, doing life together. You're just in your comments saying thank you so much for your feedback, or here's a heart, thank you for commenting. Like, again, that's a broadcast where influencers, business owners have their competitive edge, if you will, is converting that audience into a community, which is doing a deeper and more meaningful level of life with you, in that. I'll also say that you don't have a fully functioning area of community until you have a shared space. that your community knows, hey, like this is our hangout spot, this is where we're going. Doing that, there's shared ownership and responsibility in it. So you have a culture that everybody knows. You have things that are like repeatable of like, what do we do in Cows and Brunch? We eradicate our loneliness, you know. You have common language and some of those pieces. You also have roles. So you have ways that your community can get involved in a deeper level with you. So um that's through providing them language, through providing them opportunities to serve at a greater level, as they go through your programs, like being able to be like, hey, do you want to be an ambassador or a moderator or an affiliate? Like those are awesome ways to empower and plug in your community. Um, Also that you're getting survey feedback from them and going, hey, like where do you want to go as a community and what does this look like? Making sure that their voice is implemented into the products and services that you begin to offer. Because oftentimes we're like, man, I wish that I had this. So maybe I'll start a business around it, or maybe I'll do this. And then oftentimes it's not what people really need. And so most of the time when people are like, I need this, you're like, oh, yeah, that part of it. Like, okay, like, and doing that. So those would be some of the pieces I would say to like successfully building a active, thriving, healthy community would look like.
Those are so good. There was like 10 super, super valuable tips there that we could totally go down and be like, how do you do this? How do you do that? Hire Tiffany, everybody. Okay. So here's my next thing. You said that building community builds a scalable business model. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So okay, I will start off with the bare bones and build from there. So oftentimes when people are called to build community, I will go as far as to say that most of the time it comes from a deficit or a pain point in your life. And I often say that some of our greatest pain is also our greatest victory. And so for me and how I communicate that, just explaining, I didn't grow up in a traditional family unit. And so I had oftentimes that very like pain point of like, man, I wish I grew up in a traditional family unit of what that looked like. And then how God has totally used that purpose because there's a level of empathy that I have for the experience of a family unit and connection that has allowed me to draw people into a greater family and spirit of adoption because it's what I longed for my entire life. And I
Mm.
would say for many of us, you've probably bought products or services and you've walked in and you're like, this isn't it. Like they're missing this, they're missing that. And we're waiting around for people to do it when oftentimes like those are actually signs to your calling and purpose and the things that you're meant to operate in. And yet we have this unfair expectation of waiting for people to come to the table. And so that's why I always say that community is the hard and holy work because it you need a courageous muscle of being like, you know what, like I'm going to take ownership of this and I'm going to go after it because you actually have a prophetic grid and blueprint to what God has called you to step into in regards to what that's supposed to look like. And so before thinking of like, oh my gosh, this grandiose community of I want to do this or do that, like oftentimes it just starts off in those smaller pain points of like something that you're called to build with in terms of that. You start off small and start inviting people to the table of like, hey, this has been something I've been thinking about, ruminating on, and I just kind of want to start to ideate with you. Would you come together in prayer with me on thinking about what this could look like? And if you feel like you have a vision to be part of it in any way, and start off with the conversation there. When you're able to start off like in that manner of being like intentional and starting to dream and ruminate with God of like, okay, this is the business or the things that I'm being called to step into in a greater and more meaningful way. You're able to start to build that out with God, you know, and as your community, your business, your brand, your course that you're offering continues to grow, um, as long as you start to take those intentional steps of before you go rush out to like build anything or like I'm going to go spend $10,000 on building out this website because, I need to be perfect, or I need to go get a coach and spend this amount of money before I'm legitimate and whatever those things are. I would say like always like ask people to be part of the process, like get feedback into like what you're building. Um, because community is going to be like what sustains you. It's going to be the anchoring point for your vision and your greater mission. So on the days that you want to give up, which happen, they don't happen seldom. Sometimes I'm like, all right, let's get rid of this. And then you come back to the vision and be like, okay, all right, this is what we're doing. All right, and you keep doing that. Um, I think as long as you start from that place, no matter what your community looks like in terms of that, you can do that. The last thing I'll say within that, because I know this is a little bit of a rabbit trail, is that I have gone into different masterminds and courses, and I've been so frustrated because I want to stay with that person and they don't offer me a chance to. It's like at the end of the 12 weeks, okay, thanks for investing $5,000, like see you on the flip side. And then maybe a year later, they're like, I'm offering this or I'm offering that. Give people an opportunity to stay with you because they actually want to stay within your ecosystem. And so, one of the things of building a scalable community business or brand is creating a customer journey that's going to allow people to continue to work with you, um, either from a, like hands-on experience or just from a subscription standpoint so that people can stay in your life cycle and stay with you because there's enough of shiny object syndrome out there. And if people are like, ooh, sparkly, and you don't have something ready for them, then most of the time you are going to potentially lose out on the opportunity of doing more life with that person. So,
That's so good. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? I'm talking to, so I know we're on the podcast, but I'm also talking to my mentorship ladies that when Tiffany talks, you're like, say more, keep going. Tiffany, here's a big question that I feel like I would love to know what your thoughts are, and a big question that I think a lot of us struggle with. Do you start off, or what are your thoughts on high ticket pricing versus low ticket pricing, slash, how do you price yourself?
okay, I'm passionate about this. I
I'm
talk about this
excited. I
a
know
lot
you
with
are.
my people. So, okay, so from a smaller ticket offer, typically like we're talking for $47 a month, you're going to have access to my courses, like all those different pieces, is typically going to be a volume play. And oftentimes, I don't have any beef with the volume play other than, how well are you able to like really serve people in the volume of what that looks like. And so you better have systems and structures in place that are going to allow you to scale and be able to be intimate with a volume audience. Because how are you converting that audience into other higher tickets? And then also, I will say that I work with a lot of Christian business owners who are building out like prophetic coaching. And so like for them, they're like, well, Sean Bowles does a $47 offer, type thing. And oftentimes I'm like, yes, he does, but he also has the audience to be able to do like a high volume offer like that. Whereas you're starting out, and so you need to honor the time and the impartation that you're spending in building out your program. And people need to like where your money is where your heart is. And so like what can people expect to be able to gain from your program with the time and the amount of investment that they're going to make in the program, and how much of an impact do you want to see, and where do you want to see your people grow? What are the results that you have? And then let's start to put a price around that. And I know for I feel comfortable in talking because a lot of my clients aren't Christian sometimes, so it's fun when you get to play in this pool, with it. Because a lot of people are petrified of like, okay, well, how do I price out something of what that looks like and all the different pieces. The second piece, third piece I spend a lot of time in is market research. So writing down maybe um I don't know, 6 to 10 names of people that are maybe in a similar sphere of influence that you are doing or where you're at. And then I literally, anytime before I create a program, an offer, I literally have a spreadsheet and I put their name, I put what the price point is, what the week duration time is, and what they are offering for that. And I start to just kind of look, all right, like what's the buzz, like in the industry of like what's happening here. And then the fourth and final piece to how I like to think about it is what is the rhythm and the season of life that you're currently in? And like what is God ordaining you to spend your time and how does he want to spend your time? If he's like, Tiffany, I'm going to give you 10 hours a week to focus in on your business and you need to make A, B, C, D, and E amount of money to cover the bills so that the rest of the time and know thyself to be true, like like how much energy it takes to serve people. And for some of you, it could be like, I could keep doing this all day long. But is that scalable? Is that something that you're gonna meant to be chained to for the rest? Because then you've gotten accustomed to making a certain amount of money, and then you're like, okay, I have to do these many coaching times or these things to do that. And then also you're like, okay, well, I want to be a mom. I want to pick up my kids from school every day. Like, I want to take every Friday off so I can spend it with my husband. Like, I want to take every Wednesday off because I want to go serve and volunteer at church or do some of those pieces. So then you start to think about, okay, what are my monthly expenses? If I only was working 3 days a week, if I was only working 10 hours on those 3 days, and I want to bring in $6,000 a month, then okay, now I'm going to divide my time into $6,000 and then go, okay, does that look realistic of can I start to bring in people from there, and there? And then that's where it gets fun because then you can start to play around with, well, if I have 5 high ticket clients at this amount of money, and then that gives me the wiggle room of being able to provide sponsorships and scholarships to other people and some of my lower ticket offers, and I only need 10 of them, then this looks really fun. And then, you know what? God, I know you've called me to be a steward of money. So now I'm going to go ahead and like push that because I'm going to bring in 6 figures this year. All right. So what does that look like? If my goal, I'm used to making 6K, but guess what? I want to make 10K this month. Then what does that get to look like, God? And then you start to prophetically and strategically build a blueprint to what does that look like to build a business to continue to do that. And then I would sorry, last thing I'd say is have goals. Like so many of us are like, oh my gosh, I'm just gonna see what God wants to do in this, and that's all amazing and wonderful. But again, God has called us to be stewards, and He's like, what do you want? Like, what would feel life-giving for you? Like, what would look like for you that would be life-changing? Like, what would it look like for you to walk out and have that money and go on that mission field that every single year you're like, that trip is too expensive? Like, that's not God's heart for you, but He continues to beckon you to be like, I know the desires of your heart because I made you, I faceted, I shaped you that way. But I want you to tell me, like, I want you to honor who I've made you to be. And then let's start to steward that together. Let's start to map out the marketing plan for that and the offers and the services that are going to get you to that point. And I love that that's like where it's just he's such a great father in that, and that's like where he wants to meet us in that like super intimate and sweet spot.
Yes, Tiffany. Everything you just said. I love too how you brought up knowing your season because that I think is one thing that people miss and they like compare seasons with somebody else. Well, their business is booming and blah blah blah. It's like, well, God might be doing something different, and that doesn't mean it's less successful. It's aligning with what is God prophetically saying to you right now because He's always doing a good thing. It might not look like somebody else's, but what is He doing? And then aligning with that and then building out a business strategy from there, which is just so good. And yes, what do you want? Right? And letting and co-creating with God. Okay. To give the social media mentorship ladies an opportunity to ask you questions at the end of this podcast, which plug for the social media mentorship, which is going to be opening up in a couple weeks. You can be on these calls and get to ask direct questions to our amazing guest speakers as well. But the last question that I want to ask for the podcast is, Tiffany, based on your experience and everything that you've seen in the last 10 years, how important is it for specifically Christian women to focus on building their personal brand in 2024?
Oh gosh, yeah. Quick antidote experience for this is that I spent way too many years not building my personal brand, um, which made then the community or the thing that I was building almost inauthentic because I was staying in this false humility of making it about everyone else. And so it was like, oh my gosh, isn't so and so amazing? And people were like, well, wait, like who created this and what does this look like, and so it always left lingering questions. And what it looks like, when the truth of the matter is that the community I built, no one else could build that community, because it was out of the deepest and most intimate places of my heart. But me and staying in hiding just continued to allow me to have a false reality of safety, when ultimately it was what people wanted. People were like, I want access to Tiffany, I want access to who she is. And I can continue to make Gals at Brunch about everyone else and about all these amazing chapters and all the amazing things that we're doing around the world. But at the end of the day, like, Gals at Brunch was created out of a disposition and out of a heart posture, out of some of the greatest pain and disappointment that I had experienced in life, of wanting and longing for deeper and more meaningful friendships. And if I'll cry on this. If I continue to stay hidden, then that agenda gets to become everyone else's. It's like it gets to become everything that it isn't. And from a cultural standpoint, and when it's more important than ever to take a stand for shifting atmospheres and culturally, like, this is what we're going after. Um, I mean, every agenda will come in and take it away. Every single agenda is at hand. And I say that from a political standpoint, say that from every single thing. And I remain pretty neutral on a lot of those things. But I say that because the things that God has called you to build, like, it's so important for you to be able to take a stand for who you are and who God has made you to be, because if you don't, someone else always will. Always. And um I think, again, like, we try and create a false sense of safety within that, of they don't want to know about me, like, they don't care about me, who am I? In doing that. And like, for me, as just someone that has run something around Gals at Brunch, something very vulnerable, is like, I'm a plus size person, and that it's around food or whatever. And oh my gosh, like, am I gonna, like, if someone is someone gonna rip me apart, like, in terms of like what that looks like. And so I think that, again, it's been all those false senses of security, if you will. Um, but it's, what is the mandate God has given you? And then to be able to build a personal brand and business around that is more important than ever, because it honors who God has made you to be. And I think that that's the greatest lie, is that we can convince ourselves that, like, oh, who am I? Or what does that look like? When I think a lot of us have been waiting for revival in some sense or form, or we've experienced it in different glimpses and pieces, when I really think that all of revival is seeing sons and daughters walk into the full manifestation of who God has called us to be. And when I think about a world of Christians that can do that, that's when we see the world set on fire. That's when we see heaven come to earth. And that's all personal branding is you just stepping into the mandate of who God has made you to be. And yeah, I don't think there's anything more glorious than that. And I talk about freedom a lot, and other people are like, yeah, freedom, it sounds like this amazing principle or thing, like, of man-made constraints. But oftentimes it's, what is the freedom that you need to step into in your life, and the areas that you've handcuffed yourself to, because of, thinking that, oh, I need to show up in this way, or do this in this way, or so and so's doing this. And it's asking God to, and invite him into those places, because he's the safety, he's the security, and being able to allow you to step into everything that you've been called to be, because that's his mandate for you is freedom and to step into brilliantly every facet and way that he has created you to be. And that is not a spirit of fear.
Hmm. Man, guys, is she is she not incredible? And in every way, just capturing so much of God's heart. There have been so many times where I've been like, Tiffany, what do you think? Should this be my Instagram bio? And I'm like, and she's like, no, Melissa, you're so much more than that. And she calls me higher, and I can feel how even on this call, and for people listening, you can feel just the importance of stepping into it and the mandate and how God calls us higher. And Tiffany has such a prophetic gifting that comes through in business strategy and marketing and branding, but she really is a revivalist of people's hearts and knowing what's important and knowing God's heart. And I know that everybody listening felt that through your words and who you are. And I just feel so grateful for you, Tiff, and so honored by who you are. You're so fantastic. So thank you so much for being a guest on the show and speaking to the ladies. And we will have another episode next week. So thank you everyone for tuning in and listening. So see you next week on the show.